It's that time of year again, and I've been getting a lot of questions from Year 12s who've been just trying to work out what should I do next year when I leave school? How do I choose what my career path should be? How do I work that out? How do I go about making that kind of decision? And it's been 10 years since I made that decision, and I've learned a lot of things in that time, a lot of things which if I'd known back then, definitely, I'm not sure if I would have made very different choices, but I would have understood a lot more about what I was doing and had a lot more confidence. So here, in no particular order, 6 things that I think you should think about as you choose career. Number 1, play to your strengths and your loves. And maybe that's a bit obvious to you. Do something which you're good at and do something which you enjoy. That's probably one of the most oft repeated kinds of principles you should keep in mind when you're making this kind of decision. But what do I mean by that? Play to your strengths. So when you think about, okay, what am I good at, and what energizes me? Think about, are you a people person, or do you prefer to work in kind of like a more solitary environment where you can do things on your own? Are you a creative type? Are you a leader? Are you highly analytical, or do you like reading? What things are you good at? And really importantly, ask people who know you really well what you're good at, because number 1, you might think you're good at things which you are not good at, and your friends or your family, those people who've known you a long time, they'll be able to tell you whether that's true or not. And secondly, there are probably some things you're good at that you have no idea you're good at. You never really think of them as your strengths. And when you ask others for their honest opinion, people who've known you over a long period of time, they might be able to reveal things about you that you're good at which you weren't aware of before. And then not only play to your strengths, but play to your loves. So what kinds of things do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? What drives you? Think about those things so that when you go about work, one of the most common questions I get is, well, how do you stay motivated? Work is really hard. Whatever work you do, even the ones that look most glamorous or look really easy, they're very hard work. So what's going to keep you going during those times, the late nights or the long days? It's going to be the fact that you have a real desire to do what you're doing. And it's a really sad position to be in, to get into a job, into a career, and to actually have the daily practices and activities of your job drive you nuts and frustrate you. That's not a place you want to be. So number 1, play to your strengths and your loves as well. Secondly, don't confuse the degree with the job. What do I mean by that? When you go to uni, right, you might spend 3 or 4 or 5 years studying at university or TAFE or wherever you go. And a lot of people make their decision about what they should do on the basis of what's the degree like? What are the hours like? Where will I have to travel to? Do I have to go interstate, or is the university really far away? But really, that's of very minor importance when you compare it to the actual job you're going to do after you leave uni. Like it's, roughly 4 years of study, maybe a bit more, versus say 40 years in your job if you live that long, right? So that's a really easy comparison to make. You've got to work out whether you're going to really enjoy the job itself. And sometimes the degree and the job are drastically different. I'll just give you a common example. My friends who are in finance right now, they studied commerce or maybe comm law. And commerce on its own, if you just did straight commerce, it's one of the shortest degrees there is. It's 3 years, and the contact hours are relatively small, like less than 15 hours a week. And so you get this impression that, it's a pretty easy kind of degree to study. But when you get out into the workforce, people in finance jobs are among the hardest working that I know of. The hours are crazy. It's not uncommon for new grads, and even after you've been graduated for a while and you've been in your job for a few years, to work crazy hours like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for months on end. So don't confuse the degree and whether it's easy or hard or what it's like with the actual job, which is what you're really going to stick with. How do you make sure you keep them distinct? Well, when you're asking people for advice, should I do this? Should I do that? What do you think about it now that you've gone through it? Ask people at uni, that's fine. But don't just ask people who have only studied it and haven't actually worked in the job. Try and find some people with some experience. Ask your parents or your parents' friends, or if you've got other older people that you know, try and find someone with 5 or 10 years in the job, and they'll be able to tell you what the job is really like, and you might get a better sense of whether you'll be good at it or whether you'll enjoy it or not. Okay, thirdly, be willing to take some risks. Now, this is something that a lot of people who are going to be watching this video are very averse to. I'm a risk-averse kind of person. I don't like going to places where it's uncertain or I'm not sure how things are going to play out. I really like to have certainty about how something's going to plan out and what steps I have to go through and what the outcome will be. But when it comes to career, you've got to be willing to take some risks. Here's some examples. If it's really what drives you and you're really good at it, then consider taking an uncommon course. A lot of your friends will probably do similar kinds of degrees, and maybe, as was in my case, there was no one in my grade at school who chose the course and the career that I chose. In fact, there wasn't even someone in the year above me or the year below me for a while. So that was a risk that I took, that I wouldn't have any friends in the course that I did. And even when I went to the same university as my friends, I often didn't get to see them because university is a huge place. There were like 30,000 students at the university I went to. So that was a risk, but it was totally worth it. Other risks you might take are making a choice, but being willing to change after, say, 6 months or 12 or a couple of years when you work out, this is not what I want after all, and this is not going to be helpful. It's a risk. You feel like you've wasted a couple of years, but it's better to decide after 2 years that you should change rather than say after 20 years be stuck in something which really drives you crazy and you don't enjoy and isn't helpful to people. If you're in that kind of position, you're not going to be doing a good job and you're not going to be helpful to the people who you're actually serving in your job. So be willing to take risks like that in choosing your career. Okay, fourthly, and related to the last one, don't expect your career to be perfect, okay? When I said, you should be willing to take risks and change courses or change careers and jobs after you get there, that doesn't mean you should get into a university degree and it's like, this isn't exactly what I dreamed of. It's not just right. I'm just going to leave it straight away. My generation, Gen Y, has become kind of famous for not being able to hold down a job or floating between different careers and changing. And I think part of that is because my generation often has unrealistic expectations of what their job will be. And they kind of have this idea that once they pick the right thing, they'll try to sort of float on clouds after they've picked it and it'll be really awesome. Everything will be easy. But that's usually not the case. Even if you've made the right choice, things will not be easy. For instance, every job has parts that people don't like to do. Even the best jobs, So for instance, one of the things that I'm thinking of, my friends around my age who are doing medicine, which so many people aspire to, it's got parts of the job that suck, Not to mention the fact that there's so many years of study, but after you get into hospitals, you have to do things like shift work and your life just gets turned upside down for weeks at a time, and the pay isn't as great at different stages, and it can be really difficult to have relationships and start a family and all that kind of thing. So every job has parts that suck. As a teacher, I don't enjoy writing exams or writing reports. I'd much rather just be in the classroom explaining things and helping people learn. That's what drives me. But they're kind of part and parcel. They come together. So every job is going to have bits in it that you don't like. Okay. But, you also can't expect it to be perfect in that things won't be good right away. You might have to make long-term sacrifices. I'm thinking of people like, say, if you want to be a business owner, you might spend years making almost no income and having to work really, really long nights until you make it big, or you get into, you're able to start a business at the place where it's going to be most effective. It might take years, decades to get to that point, and then you'll really enjoy it. Or things like, again, for myself, my career just isn't a very high income career, even though it's what I love. I don't get paid a lot, relatively speaking, for it. And I didn't think that would be that big a deal. I didn't picture myself in high school as one of those people who absolutely loves money and wants to have, massive salaries. But I have to say, when I in my first few years when I was working, and I'd see my friends graduate, people who say went to investment banking. And IBs, they might make in their first year, if they land the right job and their skills are recognized, they might be making six figures annually just very quickly after graduating. And I have to admit, that stung a little bit. So are you willing to sort of make those long-term sacrifices? Again, if you're going to go into like a creative pursuit, maybe if you go into fashion or photography or design or anything like that, often people in those jobs are going to be doing grueling, menial, sort of low-class work for a long time before they hit the level that they're really pleased with working with. So be ready for it to not be perfect. And also, don't forget that often we only love things after we're good at things, right? And I often get that, I teach maths, right? So people often say to me after being in my class for a few months, they're like, I hated maths before, but now that I get it, it's actually not that bad. I quite enjoy it, right? So can you picture that you may get into a job and be not very skilled at it, have very low competency, you think it's not that good, but then once you actually start to develop skill, you're like, wow, I love this. This is great. I love coming to work. So you got to be patient with it. Be willing to take risks, like I said, and change when it's the right thing to do. But don't just, this sucks. I'm out of here. I'm only going to, it's been 2 weeks and my job isn't, really awesome. You got to give it a little more time than that. Okay. So don't expect things to be perfect. Fifthly, you got to get this in your head, and it's going to be really hard to think about it and believe it. But your job, whatever you choose, your career, it's not about you. All the criteria that we've talked about so far, they've been about what you love and what you're good at and what fits you. But really, every worthwhile job is about creating a product or rendering a service that benefits other people. And so don't just think about, what's going to be fulfilling for me. That tends to be the way that our society and our culture encourages people to just pick what's good for you. But you should also pick a job which is good for your community, which contributes to the people around you and benefits society. And it's not just, you don't have to be altruistic just to make a decision like that. Even if you just want to be sort of, it's about me. It's actually one of the most self-frustrating things to have a job and it just be about you. It is not satisfying at all in the long term to do a job, and at the end, the only person who benefits is just yourself. Okay, we are built to be part of community and to have a job which actually contributes to other people and is good for them. So don't just think about what's going to be fulfilling for you. Think about, when I pick a career, I'm going to do it because our country or other countries needs people who are skilled and excellent at this particular kind of job. Lastly, remember the privilege of choice. It's kind of a funny thing to have this conversation about choosing career, and that's such a big burden for us in this age because, in decades past, a lot of the people who are watching this video will have been born in this country, but their parents were migrants. They came to this country because they dreamed of having choices and flexibility that we kind of have now and take for granted. And in fact, they would have given anything to have the kind of ability to choose between careers and have a great education and have all these paths laid out in front of them. And in many cases, they did give everything. I can speak from my own parents' point of view. They came to this country and my mum was a newsreader for a television station back where she came from. It was very highly acclaimed, and she came to this country and she was a stay-at-home mom so that me and my siblings could have the opportunity to have a world-class education and then be able to, on the basis of that schooling and university, choose what we want to do with our lives. And so as you try and toss out, what are my preferences going to be? What should I do with the rest of my life? Don't think about it just in terms of what a tough decision it will be, even though it is tricky to choose. Just remember, it's a bit like the picture that I have in my head is of us sort of walking into a banquet and there's all this amazing food laid out and we have this problem of having to pick, what should I eat, right? Well, for many of us, all the choices laid out in front of us are fantastic choices. So don't get caught up in, man, this is terrible. I have to eat caviar or, prawns or whatever wonderful food is there. Remember, It's a privilege to be able to choose, and all the different kinds of choices that you have are, in many ways, really fantastic choices. So in summary, do what you love and what you're good at. Don't confuse the degree with the job you're going to do with the degree. Be willing to take some risks. Don't expect it to be perfect right away. Remember, your job is not really about you. And lastly, realize the privilege of the choice that you have to make. And good luck.